Did you know Pentecost is a biblical festival? It is also known as the Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks, the Festival of Harvest, or the Festival of First Fruit. It normally happens 50 days after Passover. Well, you know, Jesus Christ was crucified on the Passover festival. 40 days after that, he ascended to heaven from the Mount of Olives in full sight of his disciples. While he was ascending to heaven, he instructed his disciples and told them not to leave Jerusalem, but to remain there until they receive the promise of Father. He was referring to the arrival of the Holy Spirit. And the disciples followed the instruction of Jesus Christ and they remained in Jerusalem. There were about 120 believers in Jesus Christ, and they were lodging in one single house together. And the day of Pentecost arrived. When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like that of a violent rushing wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were staying. They saw tongues like flames of fire that separated and rested on each one of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in different tongues, and this as the Spirit enabled them. Well, during the Pentecost or the Shavuot festival, this event happened. But also we must remember, this was a big festival, and there were many Jews and people who converted into Judaism from all over the world lodging in Jerusalem at that time. When these people in Jerusalem heard this violent rushing wind sound, their attention was drawn to the house where the believers of Jesus Christ were staying. When they came to the house, they were puzzled. They heard this 120 believers in Jesus praying and speaking and uttering in many different languages the glories of God, glorious acts of God. They were puzzled and they were saying, how can this be? How can these Galileans speak in all these different languages and declare the glorious acts of God? As a result of that, some of these Jews said, well, these people must be drunk with the new wine. Then Peter stood up and said, hey, we are not drunk with the new wine. And he began to preach his sermon. He began to tell what Jesus did in Jerusalem only more than a month ago. When Jesus finished his sermon, about 3,000 of these people gave their life to Jesus, and that is the birth of the church. During the Pentecost feast, or in other words, during the feast of first fruit, or during the feast of harvest, God harvested the first believers that came from all over the world to Jerusalem through the preaching of Peter, but more importantly, through the work of the Holy Spirit. And that's why we say the Pentecost is the birthday of the church. In fact, on that day, through that one sermon, through that act of the Holy Spirit, church was birthed. 120 believers, suddenly their total number reached over 3,000 because of the work of God. But that is also, the Pentecost is also the time where the prophetic clock of Israel was paused, and it will remain paused until another significant event which is yet to happen, that is rapture. When the rapture happens, the church age, which started at the time of Pentecost with the sermon of Peter, will come to an end. Church will be taken out of the way, and the nation of Israel will become the prime nation of God in the prophetic clock again. The last 7 years will kick in. Great tribulation will take place. And at the end of that, the raptured believers, the church, will return together with Jesus Christ to establish the millennium or the global kingdom for 1,000 years, global kingdom of Jesus Christ in Jerusalem. Now, it is important that we see this picture clearly and understand that what started in Pentecost will come to full completion on the day of rapture. If you look at the timeline, Israel as a nation has already been established in 1948. After an exile of 1,878 years all over the world, Jews came back to their homeland again in 1948. They became a nation. They established themselves, and they even took Jerusalem as their capital city. Now we are very close to the day of rapture. Actually, there is nothing that holds rapture at the moment. Rapture can happen anytime. It's imminent. But the significance of this is, once the rapture happens, those that are left behind will be subjected to the wrath of God and the wrath of the Antichrist. That's why it might be our last chance. It might be your last chance. If you have not yet given your life to Jesus Christ, go and do it as soon as possible. Rapture might happen any moment. The church age might come to an end any moment. Time is ripe. Time is ticking. And Christ is on his way. We are a non-profit, independent and non-denominational Christian ministry organization. Please consider supporting this ministry with your donations.